Hi and welcome to the Aion Podcast, the podcast dedicating to cultivating healthy masculinity in men. And with me today, I have Jellybean Gen.
Hi.
Welcome,
Hi, hello.
Jen. It's an honor to have you here, and I
In
am
order to
very
be here.
excited to talk to you and see what you have to say about certain things. I watch your videos on YouTube, and I think you're doing a great work.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I think you're doing a wonderful work, and I think it's very important and very brave to do what you are doing in today's climate.
Mm.
And for that, I will salute you, and the whole team has a lot of respect for you, and we think that what you are doing is very great.
Thank you so much. That means a lot.
I think this is a very great. I found this is a great way to start the conversation and delving into who you are. And if you, in your own words, were to describe who is Jellybean Gen?
Yeah, so my name is Jen. My real name is Genevieve, but I go by Jen. And that's also how the name Jellybean came to be, is because Genevieve in English sounds a lot like jellybean. So I have a YouTube channel that I started about 2 years ago, or now 1.5 years ago, where I talk about like social issues and political issues, mainly, and then I talk about feminism as well, and my criticism of that movement and the people in that movement as well. Yeah.
How did you start when you first started doing YouTube? Uh, what was your aim then? What were you aiming for, and has that changed? Did you start with feminism, or has that changed over time? How's that journey been?
Yeah, so I started. So the first introduction I had to YouTube was when the YouTuber Luai Ahmed invited me onto his channel, and he mostly talks about immigration and more heavily like immigration and Islam and also anti-feminism in some ways. And so he invited me on to talk about why I left feminism, and then he recommended me to get my own channel, and so I started. And I felt mostly that I was so interested in politics, and when I stopped being a feminist, I got very interested in all of the aspects of politics and all of the social issues that there are. And like I was really interested in talking about these things, but as I left feminism, I also lost a lot of my friends, and I didn't have many friends that wanted to speak on these things. And I felt that people didn't want to listen. So it felt like a really good outlet to talk about these things on YouTube. And also, like when I was discovering these things, I would often the first import. What do you say?
Uh,
The first
the first introduction input.
into like these things was YouTube and listening to ordinary people, and I found
Yeah.
really great comfort in that, especially listening to other girls who had been through the same thing. And so when I got the opportunity to be that person myself, I thought that was really, really cool, because I'd seen that in other girls that I would be like so inspired by, and then I got these messages from other girls that could see that in me, and so that's when, and I continued with that. And yeah.
Yeah.
And so from the beginning I was just talking mostly about feminism, and now I talk about more cultural issues as well, and social issues, like I said, and political issues, and yeah, a little bit of the migration issue that we have in Sweden as well. So it's been a journey.
And
And
I'm so glad to have you to hear, yes, you said, to have the perspective from a woman
mm-hmm.
about feminism. And what is so wonderful about that too is that you have experienced the both sides of the spectrum, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And the one side is that once upon a time you were a feminist, and now you are not a feminist. And that was the situation for me too. You know, I have actually voted for the feminist
Oh no.
once. You see, I was deep in the rabbit hole.
Yeah, I
You
saw
know,
that picture of you and Gudrun Schyman.
She-Man. You know, that is not even so. Oh wow, the bird just
Yeah, I'm sorry.
is very much welcome.
Mm.
Or she. Well, I met Gudrun and I've been to her lectures and I took a photo of her standing. And the funny thing was when we took the photo, I was standing like this first, like, and she was like, "We don't do that here. Open hands." And then I opened my hand and it's like, "Sorry, ma'am." And then the picture was taken and yeah. I'm very curious to ask you like how, if we start at this end of the spectrum where you were identifying as a feminist, and I would like to know a little bit, how did you get into becoming a feminist, and what were you thinking at the time, and how did that transfer? How was the process from that to where you are now?
So the
That
thing
would be
is
very
that,
interesting.
yeah, so the thing is that it came very natural for me to become part of that movement because I was always very boyish in my interests, and so I was also kind of like an alternative kid, you know. So I was kind of drawn to those like the alternative scene, and the feminism is very rampant. What's the word? Rampant in these scenes. So it came very, very natural to me, and like my temperament was also, you know, very fitting with the feminists. And I was, and I think I kind of blamed a lot of things. Like I found that I could blame everything on like the patriarchy, and I could blame that I was, because I had been bullied at school for being the way that I was, and then I could blame, you know, the patriarchy for that, and I could have a movement of girls that could make me feel validated in that I was a little bit different, I could say, and
So
so
you
that's.
didn't feel validated, or you felt that you were a little bit different, and then with the feminism, was it like you felt like you got an answer to
Yes.
why you were feeling in this way, and the answer was that it was the patriarchy that had put you in this situation and was responsible for the suffering that you were experiencing. Is that the right way to put it?
Yes, and then also that um so yeah, so the patriarchy was like the like I didn't fit into the norm, and the norm was, you know, the girl type way that you are supposed to be and you are forced to be, and I really bought into that, and so it just felt very natural for me that I would be. I feel like I don't know how to explain it. um
It's cool.
um no, but yeah.
What
No.
was the you were heading towards that these things that you experienced, that you felt boyish and different, and then from the support from these other girls, and then together it feels like you got some form of connection there
Yeah.
with those girls, some form of um, bond,
Mm-hmm.
and together you would fight the enemy responsible for these things. And how did what did happen after that, when you started like identifying there, and how did that transfer to where did you see the red lights, and how did you like you know?
Yeah, no, because like I felt that like the feminist worldview was very much like part of everything when where I was. So
Mm.
and I felt that like the pay gap was real. I felt that the pink tax was real. I felt that, you know, commercials where they were sexualizing women, like I thought that was the worst thing in the world. And I thought
Mm.
that like the structures were everywhere and like, well, I didn't fit in because I wasn't the way that you are supposed to be in this world. And, you know, like, and everyone is oppressed under this. All women are oppressed. And I was being treated poorly because I was a lady and everything you can, you know, I was a victim basically. And so I bought into everything. But
How did
then
that affect you
it
when you
affected
bought?
me in that I was a worse I was I was not very kind to myself or to my partner at the time, and I wasn't very kind to the guy friends that I had,
Hmm.
because I felt that if they I felt that they were taking up too much space when I wasn't being able to talk, or you know, like
Oh,
they had so many more benefits than I did. And you know,
yeah.
like I thought that when a guy, like I really bought into, you know, the man spreading thing, and I would, you know, and I would talk about feminism where people really didn't want to hear me talk about feminism, you know, things like that.
Yeah, I feel you.
And I wouldn't take responsibility. I think that's the number one thing is I wouldn't take responsibility over my own actions.
Funny thing about the men's spreading thing, the simple answer to why we have spread our legs is to avoid testicular discomfort and pain. You know, you squeeze those two balls together by like this. What the fuck is
No,
with
but I
that?
was so convinced that it's because you are displaying your power.
Yeah.
And I remember at a party where I was like saying this to one of my guy mates, and he was like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "No, it's like this, I promise."
It's funny how it turned out that way. You know,
Yeah.
that spreading legs is sh sh do showing power. You know,
Hmm.
when in
Dominance
reality it's just
display.
avoiding some testicular discomfort.
Hmm.
You know.
But the thing was, so like it started with, you know, there are some really crazy feminists out there, like really crazy feminists. And so it started when I was able to see those feminists and like, oh no, I'm not like them. I'm not like them at
Mm.
all. And then it
Mm.
also went to me being able to laugh at the crazy feminists. But then it started with the whole non-binary thing started to become very like normalized within feminism. And I was like, what the fuck is that? Like, I don't
Mm.
understand. What is this? And I didn't want to be a bigot, so I started to research what this whole non-binary thing was and also what the whole like transgender thing was, like trying to understand it fully and completely. Um and then and then also like that's when I started to also like listen to people like Jordan Peterson and
Mhm.
people like him. And then like and it started to like in H3H3 they were also making fun, like everyone was making fun of feminists back then, and I was kind of like buying into that. But then after a while I started to realize that no, it's not the crazies, it's like the whole underlying ideas, like the pay gap does not exist in the way that they think, the pink
Mm.
tax does not exist in the way that they think, I am not oppressed because I am a woman. It's like these underlying core beliefs of feminism was starting to dismantle themselves in front of me. And then like the final straw was like I watched the movie The Red Pill by Casey.
Oh, good movie. I've seen it
Very
too.
good movie.
Yeah.
And then after that, I just said like, no, I can't call myself a feminist anymore. I don't buy this anymore.
Wow.
Um, because I
That,
couldn't, and it was really hard for me because I would really
I can
like I
bet.
said, like my entire worldview was, you know, affected in some way with my relationship with feminism because it affected my relationship with myself and everyone around me.
Oh,
Um,
wow. To me, it shows much strength that you were able to make that transition. Because, as you say, when you are identified so much with an ideology, and that ideology starts to crumble in your mind, that's fucking painful.
yeah.
That's that cognitive dissonance. It lasts for a while, and that time period is very much can be very painful.
No, it's really, really difficult to hear that you're wrong. Like, you don't want to
Yeah,
listen to it. You don't want to hear someone say, hey, you're wrong. Your entire worldview is wrong.
yeah,
Um, so no, yeah. And then not having anyone to talk about it with.
yeah. I was
It's
thinking about
also,
that too, and how when you made that transition, also that people probably did they like get pushed you away in a sense. Do you know what I mean?
there was a recoil. There
There
was a
was a
recoil.
recall.
Yeah,
Yes,
and I lost like two of my best friends. I lost like
really.
almost right away. Yeah. Well, I got into an argument with one of them, and then another one, and the other one just sent me like this long text where she said that we can't be friends anymore because I can't support you in what you're doing. So that was after I got my YouTube started. And me and her hadn't even talked about politics because she wouldn't talk to me about it. And so she just said that she just thought that, okay, well, I'm a Swedish Democrat and therefore I must believe in all of these things that she thought that the Swedish Democrats were. And then she couldn't be seen with me was basically what she said. And she
Yeah,
cannot support me, and so
yeah,
she
and
just broke up with me
yeah,
as a friend.
and that to me that is such a clear display of cowardice and weakness, because what it shows me is, and what I believe a lot of people who are in these think in this ideology are motivated by virtue signaling in a way to look good to their neighbor. It's
Mm-hmm.
like moralistic populism, and the fear of not being liked or approved becomes too strong,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the reality is also a very, very terrifying thing, because what we just said was that if you think in this way or speak like this, you don't agree with the general narrative, then you are seen as something evil, you know. And what that reminds me of is that is how it started in Nazi Germany with the Jews. That people who expressed opposing views at first were socially chastised, and to me that is a very scary thing to see, because further down this road, because it's already becoming like a tyranny in a way, and it's scary to see where, if this progress, how it will progress. Because I read this book, the feminist lie,
Mm-hmm.
and I dove into the origins of the first feminist ladies, and many of them were involved in something called eugenics,
Yeah.
and I was like, what the fuck, you know? And there were written statements from like Gloria Steiner and all these uh, people that they, especially Gloria Steiner, told that she wanted to reduce the African American population, and one way for her to do that was through Planned
Abortions.
Parenthood.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know the thing, the Afro-American population has decreased 30% since that thing started.
Oh my God. That's insane.
Yeah, and
I think it's so insane with this is because these feminists will often like look at someone's like, oh, like look really far into your past, and they will look really far into like someone's ancestors and like look into some, but as soon as you do that with the feminists, you don't have to go very far to see
no,
very disturbing things, and they will just sweep
yes,
that under the rugs and be like, oh, well, but she's done so many good things.
yeah, exactly. Like,
It's like, what?
what the fuck are you talking about? She kills people, man.
Yeah.
Like um, killing on a big scale. And another feminist said that the goal should be to reduce the male population to 10%. I have it here. If I have, it was very interesting. I'm just gonna see if I can find it. Oh, it's probably not meant to be. But someone leading in the feminist movement said that the male population should be reduced and maintained at 10%.
Why?
I don't know.
Yeah.
For you as a woman, how has your life changed since being feminist and to now? I think you have explained a little bit how it was when you were feminist, that I got the feeling that you became resentful towards men, and also that you yourself were feeling worse. Did I understand you right?
Yeah, I don't think I was realizing that much as to what. So I think that leaving feminism, it wasn't just leaving feminism, it was finding something else as well and trying to find something else as well. And I think that a lot of that was just like looking inwards and seeing like what am I doing to affect my life, basically, and taking responsibility for that. And that's taught me so much. I'm becoming a better person than I was just by, looking at my own actions and how I am making my life, like who I am surrounding myself with and what I am doing in my personal relationships, basically, in a way that I just wasn't before. Yeah, and then not blaming the things that my boyfriend does, for example, on him being a man, but instead, like actually talking about what do I expect from him and what does he expect from me, and like looking at things differently, basically. And then also being realistic about my future and what I want, and not just being like, oh well, I'm fine being a cat lady when I am 35 instead, like actually. Because that's like the main thing that feminism is destroying is families.
Yes,
because it's
I
like,
want
well,
to
you
talk to
need
you
to,
about that later.
yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah,
You're
so
on fire.
so it's like so now, like in recent years, like recent 2 years, it's just like having an honest look at my life, what I want from it, what I want from myself, and yeah, what my future is going to look like. And then basically just valuing family more as well, and valuing and seeing that you don't have to be like a girl boss to be independent, and you don't have to be independent from what? Independent from the state, or independent from your boyfriend, or independent from what, yeah.
The narrative of the strong independent woman. I read a study recently that was trying to show the psychological profile of the most unhappy woman. And I think that was something in 40 years old, no children, unmarried, and working like a lawyer or doctor or something.
I think
like that.
the final red pill is motherhood. When you start looking into yourself
Yeah.
and looking into what you want in your future, if you want kids, and realizing what motherhood is, that's the final red pill. Like, you won't go back after looking into that.
Amen. Amen. And I think mothers, that's probably the most important job there is in this world.
Yeah.
Seriously. It is raising the future generation.
Yeah.
And it's been so mistreated, I think.
Yeah. No, because I think, and that's something that stuck with me, and it's a very, like, well, it's a one-liner, but it's like, well, if you look at all the houses, or if you look at like basic town structures, if you look, like 99% of everything is built by a man. but 100% of these men are born by women.
Yeah.
Like it's you cannot take that away. Like you having a mom that supports you and having a home is so essential.
Yeah.
To building character and to, you know, becoming someone and feeling safe within yourself. Is just having a mom and a home. You can't have a home without a mom.
No, the most important thing is, as you say, a home and a mom. And we know this. This is facts when we look at the psychology and the studies, and just the studies on people coming from broken homes versus people coming from homes where both the mother and father were intact and it was a happy upbringing. You know, 90% of those people coming from wholesome homes don't become criminals, and 90% of those who come from broken homes do some criminal in their life.
I've been reading a book called Mother at Home, where she discusses a little bit how the Swedish welfare system is really fucking with mothers and with children.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to give up our children when they're 16 months old. We're not supposed to give them to
That's
childcare.
fucked up.
It is, because we are completely dismissing that the child can only, and this is a little bit, okay, people may disagree, that's fine, but the studies show that the little infants can only connect to one parent. That parent is the mom.
Yeah.
If you then try to split the stay at home, the parental leave between two people straight away, you're not doing your child any favors. I'm sorry, you are not. According, and I could be wrong. I shouldn't be so but I could be wrong, but I don't think it's good for the child. And it's not oppressing the woman to let her be a stay-at-home mom in the first 2 years or so, 2 to 5 years. It's not oppressing. That's like what we want to do. A majority of women want to do. It's like our biology. And it hurts to leave the child at the daycare center.
Yeah,
when the child can't even walk, or it can walk, but it can't even talk correctly. Like, what are you doing? You have your child because you want to have a child, and you want to teach that child about the world and everything, and you want to raise your child. But our system here in Sweden is built so that we leave this child to the state, and let the state raise that child. And then we have state employed mothers in the form of daycare workers and social workers and all of that. And we think that we can replace the biological mom with these.
Yeah, it doesn't work. We can't. It
No.
doesn't work. 100% doesn't work. And we know that, you know, I can read a quote from you from, as we're talking about family here. Linda Gordon, feminist author and professor, even went so far as to state the nuclear family must be destroyed, wherever its ultimate meaning. The breakup of families now is an objectively revolutionary process. No woman should have to deny herself of any opportunities because of her special responsibility to her children. Vivian Gornick, another feminist author, stated, being a housewife is an illegitimate profession. You know?
But they
marriage.
Yeah, sorry.
Cool. Okay, I can finish the point. Since marriage constitutes slavery for women, it's clear that the women's movement must concentrate on attacking this institution.
It's insane. But the thing is that they don't understand is the only thing that they are doing is they think that they're independent, but the only thing they're doing is that they're replacing the trust that they would have onto their husband. They're placing that on the state instead, because you still have to get your money somewhere. You still have to, work for someone. And instead of being at home, taking care of your family, building a home, taking care of your kids, having a loving husband who will take care of you, you're just leaving it up to the state and hoping that it will keep on. It's the same thing.
Yeah. Yes. This is exactly what we have been talking about in the men's group, and what I have been writing about in a chapter in my book also, that the state takes the role of the mother and the father, so that people, men and women, can be little babies running around, not taking responsibility, and anything goes because, well, the state got me, you know. And I had a conversation with my grandmother about this a while back, because she lived in the time where she grew up, where all women basically stayed home with their children. And she told me that the best time of my life was when I was a child. You know, with children, we went out and we played, and if someone hurt themselves, we run home to mom, and she was always there. She always cooked, and and my personal experience is the women made my childhood. They made the home. Without them, there would have been an exterior in a way, but there wouldn't been a home. And she told me that when she became a mom, she was a stay-at-home mom. But at that time, it started to change, and the narrative became that women should work. And she said that she read it somewhere that the objective of that was to place the children under the care under the state as soon as possible, so that they could engineer them socially to be a good citizen, and to so that we would get more taxes to the state. So feminism is very Marxistic in its origins, I would say. That is putting all these parental responsibilities on the state.
I wouldn't go that far because I'm not really sure what I'm sure there are underlying purposes, but I think that the main thing here in Sweden has been, or at least from the book that I've been reading, is just that they thought that, and of course I agree with you fully on the taxes. They wanted more taxes, and if you have a two-payer tax system, then you have two people working instead of just one, and they can lower the wages or whatever. Like it's beneficial for the state and for the government for both the mom and the dad to work. I agree with that. But then also they think that people are moldable, that we are socially constructed, especially the women. They believe that if we get her to work, and if we just put in this system where she can put her children in daycare and have them taken care of, then she will just become a man, basically. A strong and successful woman is a man. They want a woman to display the features of a businessman, where it really does not work that way. And we can see that in Sweden. We can see that with how many people who get förpension, early pension, like in their 30s, and also they take sick care. They leave for health reasons very early and in very long periods in Sweden, and it's probably because they just can't handle leaving their children. They just want to stay home with their children, and that's the way that they can do that, is just to take welfare checks instead. They just rely on that instead because they just can't handle leaving their children. And the system is built that way. Like you can in a lot of cases, you can't depend on just the man working. That's the only way that you can go, is just to trick the system into letting you be home with your children. But in America, you don't have this problem in the same way. Like women there, and they work longer. The women in America, they work for a longer time because they're able to quit their jobs and then be home with their children for like 5 years or so. And then they're ready to go back to work. And then they've done that. And they go back to work and they work longer and they take higher positions, because in their 50s, then they have that out of their system, and then they're ready to take a higher position in their company. And it's like you don't have the same restrictions in the work work sphere and the job market in America as you do here. Because here it's really hard to get employed, and it's also really hard to fire you. They don't have that in America. And now this is the only book I've read on this, so don't take my word for it, but that's like the impression that I got off of reading this book, is that their system makes it a lot easier to be a stay-at-home mom if you want to. They don't have the same tax, the high tax pressure that we have here either. So they can afford having just one allowance. It's very interesting.
Yeah. It's very interesting hearing you talk about these things.
Mm.
And seems like we are talking about, in a way, how feminism is affecting women.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing we covered was with the mother thing, and I think also with that, as you said, we're trying to make women more masculine, like making them like men. And I feel that the same thing is happening to men, but that we should be more feminine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And as you were talking about in the beginning about how you felt when you were becoming a feminist, and how that made you feel and how it made you think. I was a very feminized boy once, in a way, that I was, because I didn't really have many older men to learn how to become men, to be initiated into men, and there was so many lack of male role models, and being so much in being effeminate in that way for me as a man made me so unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
It was like it crushed my soul in a way, and I was just focusing on my feelings and what I feel, and thought that was the me as a man should do. But when I started to come out from that and become red pill, as they say, my life changed so much. I've never been more fulfilled or happier or felt more meaning in my life now, when I have started to step into my masculinity as much as I can.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel this narrative is, as majority, is hurting people very much. And I think both you and me have experienced that both end of the spectrum.
I think that the main thing that I get from what you're saying is that the we the talking, all this talking, we're supposed to talk about our feelings, we're supposed to talk about what's wrong. It's not very much focused on action, which is that's like the boys' need to do things. They are so physical.
Yeah.
And like to just have them like sit down for therapy and just talk about their feelings, it doesn't really
kills them.
help in the same way. No, yeah. Like they need to feel that they are going something. They need to have a plan. They need to, feel that they are contributing and being men.
Exactly. And and if you're being a man, then people start shaming you for that, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
It's oppressive.
Yeah.
And so many dudes willingly castrate themselves to fit in. And often the motivation by doing that, I have found, is that they believe that if I submit myself to the feminist narrative and become a feminine boy, then I will gain access to sexual relations with them. But the problem is that they get rejected so badly that it crushes them. And I met these guys in the men's groups, and they are what we call, they have a Mr. Nice Guy syndrome.
Yeah.
Where they're trying to please to receive love. And So the guys get caught in like, if I submit myself, I will be severely rejected. But if I step into what I am, then I will be shamed.
Yeah.
And
But I think that's the main thing. The main thing is just that feminism gets masculinity completely wrong, and it puts men in a bad place. Because feminists believe that everything that has to do with masculinity is toxic. But it's in my view that if you get like I said, like males are very much more physical than women are, and they need to get control of that physical tendency. They need to be able to learn how to use that for good. Because instead it just gets repressed, and they get stingy, and they don't know what to do with themselves, and they get angry. They get all this anger held up in them.
yeah, until the day they snap.
Yeah.
And Claes Ekenstam, who is a psychotherapist who was on the podcast, and the reason one talked about that too, how when we talk about killers on the news and people who knew the guy often say he was the nicest guy,
Mm.
you know, and I'm not surprised, you know, and eventually it explodes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's bad.
Yeah. It's I think that's a that's a thing they need to work on, their view of masculinity. So I've read the book by, so one of the male feminists that is very famous in Sweden is Attila Yoldas, and I recently I read his book to review it, and to also I keep track of the feminists and what their beliefs are today, because I want to understand them. And so I read the book and I reviewed it, and what I've noticed is that his view of masculinity is that he thinks that masculine boys, or macho boys and men, they're boys. Like, he just sees the problem in teenage boys, and then he puts that onto as being the macho norm, the toxic masculinity, while as it's just boys who haven't gotten to be men yet, and they need
Yeah.
guidance, and they need
Yeah.
to, like, I think that's the main thing that they're missing. Is this They got it all wrong.
You know, it's so amazing to, and we have discussed this in the men's group as well, that it's so amazing to talk to a woman like yourself, who we as men feel valued, you know,
Mm.
by that, by you not hating us, you know, for our inherent traits, you know.
Mm.
And it's so rare that when we see this today, it's like we get shocked in a way, like, whoa, you don't despise me, you don't resent me, that feels good. You know. And I think you said it brilliantly there with they have confused, um, there's a great book called The King, Warrior, Magician, Lover by Robert Moore, the four archetypes of the mature masculine psyche. And I think these people, like, I don't know who it is, but Attila, have misidentified the misdevelopment of these masculine archetypes into their shadow pose, and named the shadow pose as a representative of masculinity. And their solution to try to solve it is making it worse. And that,
Yeah.
so, you know, for example, domestic violence, for example, that is what they're talking about as one of the leading factors as and the war on men, that men are abusive in the homes. And first thing, that is not true, actually. And I'm going to read you something that was very interesting. Okay. ready?
Yes.
Yes. In relationships where only one party is the domestic violence perpetrator, over 70% of the time the abuser is the woman. Just as damning, in September 2014, J.D. Glass reported in The Advocate that the National Violence Against Women survey found that women living with the same-sex partners experience intimate partner violence in their lifetimes at a rate of 35.4%, whereas heterosexual women experience it at a rate of 20.4% across their lifetime. This means that lesbian women were 75% more likely to be victims of domestic violence than heterosexual women. Further, Glass reports that 2010 at the 2013 CDC National Intimate Partner Sexual Violence Survey confirms that lesbians were more often victimized than heterosexual women. The science is in women in relationships are more violent than men, so why are men always painted as the abusive ones?
Mm-hmm.
Now, from the book The Feminist Lie. But if we talk about male violence and how feminism makes it worse, is that if we repress masculinity, it becomes toxic masculinity. In the definition that we can say immature masculinity.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's better phrasing. And by repressing masculinity, it is what creates this violence. Destroying families is what creates this violence. So I think it's a very counterproductive movement by they're pointing out problems, and their solutions are making the things worse, actually.
Yeah. And the thing is that's really, really vile is that they believe that all men are potential rapists. And so recently there was a girl by the name of Vilma. She was 17 years old.
Yeah.
She was killed by her ex-boyfriend, who, after he killed her, he decapitated her and took
Yeah.
her head back home. One of the famous male feminists, Peter Rung, who is married to the very famous Swedish feminist Nina Rung, wrote on his Instagram that this is a sign that sports clubs needs to take responsibility for structural women hate or structural women's violence, and that this is just one murder amongst the many murders that men commit in this oppressive structure that we have. And that is vile. That is so vile to think that this guy is the norm, that this is something that the normal guy would do, a crime that just any normal man would commit. It's insane to me. But that's the way that they view men. And then they say that that the male feminists say that they are working for men, but you cannot work for men with that vile view of them. It doesn't work that way.
Disgusting view.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the solution was fucking terrible.
Mm.
In a way, you can say the solution be to have stronger families and more present mothers and more present fathers.
Yes.
That would be more, because since I have gathered a lot of facts for this interview, I'm gonna take something here.
Mm.
According to, as we talked about the family and aggression and crime, I continue what I read earlier with that the nuclear family must be destroyed and etc. I jump into it. The scholarly evidence suggests that at the heart of the explosion of crime in America is the loss of the capacity of fathers and mothers to be responsible in caring for the children they bring into the world, as you said previously. This loss of love and guidance at the intimate levels of marriage and family has broad social consequences for the wider community. As you can see, Dr. Fagan's key finding demonstrates that the societal consequences of feminism war on marriage and family values. They report findings break down these social consequences very concisely as follows. Over the past 30 years, the rise in violent crime parallels the rise in families abandoned by fathers. High crime neighborhoods are characterized by high concentrations of families abandoned by fathers. State-by-state analysis by heritage scholars indicates that a 10% increase in the percentage of children living in single-parent homes, the rate of violent teenage crime corresponds with the number of families abandoned by fathers. The type of aggression and hostility demonstrated by a future criminal often is foreshadowed in an unusual aggressiveness as early as age 5 or 6. The future criminal tends to be an individual rejected by other children as early as the first grade, who goes on to form his own group of friends, often the future delinquent gang. Not only did the report look at the societal impacts of absent fathers, it also looked at homes where the biological family remained intact. To this end, the report contrasts neighborhoods of families of children where the marriage remains intact and family values are practiced. Neighborhoods with high degree of religious practice are not high crime neighborhoods. Even in high crime inner city neighborhoods, well over 90% of children from safe, stable homes do not become delinquents. By contrast, only 10% of children from unsafe, unstable homes in these neighborhoods avoid crime.
Wow. And the thing is also, I think that's very worrying statistics. If we look at how our Sweden is going and how we're so high in divorces and we're so high in, broken homes. And then also I want to have a look at the word and the term abandoned. The fathers abandoned the home. Now, I want to see how many of these cases are actually cases of fathers abandoning and why we use that term for all cases. I know, and I've started to look into how so common it is for the mom to not want the father to be in the picture when they break up for whatever reason, and she will do everything in her power to not allow that father to see the child. That is way too common, and it's insane to me how many personal stories I've heard of this, of people speaking to me about this, and I want to know if there are statistics on this, and how we can measure this and what we are doing as a society to help these men, because when you go to the women's shelters, like they obviously take the mom's side, and when you go to like childcare, whatever, BVC and those places here in Sweden, they often or almost always take the women's side. Often maybe because it's always women who work there. Like there's not a lot of men who work in these fields. And it's also because you have this view of the mom as the victim in any and all cases. And then if you look in America, where you have where the courts are to settle divorce cases and settle who is to take custody of the child. It was, as at the time of the red pill being released, that was only 18% of fathers getting to see their child, or winning the cases, I will say.
Custody battle.
Because there's a difference. Yeah, there's a difference. But it's very horrifying. Very, very horrifying. And I don't think, I have a problem with the word abandoned. There are cases where the father abandons, because I think that's the way that the father responds. Like there's this thing called, when you get a child, you can have the mother PTSD. And the thing is, when she gets that, it's very, 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 very important for her to get help, because the mother depression, like when you have your child, you can get depressed because there's all kinds of things, but the father's reaction can sometimes be that they leave, because they don't know how to handle their fears and they're, all of these emotions. And I don't know if we have the right kind of help for these fathers. We have a lot of help for mothers with mother PTSD. I don't know what it's called in English.
Mm.
But there's the term for it.
Post-traumatic stress disorder, no?
Yes,
Yeah.
for mothers in connection
Okay.
with motherhood. We have
Okay.
help for those, but we don't have help for the fathers. Maybe if we had that, we could help them patch the family together. And because it is scary to have a child, and there are so many emotions, so many feelings attached to that maybe you're not prepared, and maybe you panic, and we need to have something in place to help these men, as we have with the women, the mothers.
Yeah, wonderfully said. And
I don't know. What do you think?
yeah, I know that there is a website that is womenshealth.gov. There's no website menshealth.gov. It doesn't exist. And we can see the breast cancer funding. I read the numbers, and it was, I don't think, 30% at least, 34% more funding there. And as you were talking about, I think wonderfully said that you catch the term abandon and start to decipher it like that. That is a really broad term, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And why do they abandon? And as you said, and with the divorce rates and custody, the court systems are incredibly biased towards giving the custody to the mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a man who is one of the best men I know. He got a kid with a woman, and this woman, they had a good relationship at first, but as they progressed further down the line, she started to become more and more abusive towards him, calling him things like "you fat pig" or "you," etc. And she actually abused him. Yeah, she slapped him and stood, slapped him in the face and said, "Punch me, motherfucker," And
Yeah.
yeah, and when they divorced, she got full custody of the kids. He didn't get to see his kids at all at first. And then when he fought the battles in court, trial after trial, he finally got to meet his kid, I think 1 or 2 days every other week. And it was so obvious, as I know the guy, that he's a fantastic father, and he has wanted to become a father since he was a teenager,
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and we can say that he has abandoned his family then, perhaps. And I want to read something to you as well that is connecting to this subject, about biases. Men comprise 77% of single homeless adults. Approximately 33% of them are military veterans, PTSD, and fatherhood. Homeless men are more than twice as likely to have an alcohol or drug addiction. Of homeless clients reporting alcohol, drug, and mental health problems, 73% are male. Homeless men are more frequently excluded from emergency shelters. Single homeless men are at an increased risk of chronic homelessness. When Healing Hands interviewed Eddie Bonin, FNP, who provides health care for homeless youth, typically ages 18-24, they write, most of his clients are male. A history of child abuse is an impetus for many of these youth to leave home, he says. Once they are living on the street, they often get involved in survival sex with either gender, regardless of sexual orientation, just to get money, food, and a place to stay. Mona Shalabi reported in The Guardian on May 17, 2013. The housing charity crisis found that 84% of the hidden homeless were male. And the latest chain organization. Figures suggest that 9 out of 10 sleeping rough are male. According to Mankind Initiative in UK refugees or safe houses, there are 33 spaces dedicated to male victims of domestic violence, of which 18 are for gay males only, compared to around 4,000 spaces reserved for females.
How many did you say?
4,000. Compared to 33 and 18 were for gay males only.
Yeah.
Interesting numbers.
It is. And it's horrifying. We are so much more lenient towards women being, you know, we want to protect women and we want to, you know, save them and be there for them, but we don't really have the same we don't view men in the same way. And I mean, when they get on the streets, we need to help them. They're not bad people, just as women are not bad people for ending up on the streets. They need to have the same type of help available.
Yeah, and I don't want to, you know, victimize manhood in any way. My point is to try to demonstrate how this ideology is flawed in many ways, and its way to solve these problems is counterproductive. And political correctness. Do you see any dangers?
Just one second.
Absolutely.
Ja. Vad håller du på med? I'm really sorry about that. I thought I could have her out, but
no problem.
She was trying to nest in the corner of the kitchen. So
really?
Yeah. She's a weird one.
What a rebel.
Yeah.
I do what I want in here. You can't tell me what to do. I'm a free bird.
She's a real feminist, that one.
Yeah. But okay. Back in business. One thing I want to discuss with you, because we are talking about these things, and I think about political correctness. And I want to ask you, because I think that this society we live in are very much politically correct.
Yes.
And do you see any dangers with political correctness? And if you do, what are the dangers that you see?
I see a lot of dangers with it. If you don't have to go. So one thing that I find very, very interesting is I've been reading the book. So I've just read the first 3 chapters. So I'm very much in the beginning. The book, The Strange Death of Europe by Douglas Murray. And he brings up that the population, they did a poll on what the population of England thought about the current migration policies that they had. 75% were against that. And this is in 1971. 1971, people thought that they had too much immigration. They were against that. 4 years later, that percentage upped to 81%. And now if you scroll forward, and you look at 2015, they were still they were upping the scale of the migration, but you still could not talk about it. You could not talk about the side effects. You could not talk about what you thought about it. You could not talk about anything, even though the majority of people were not happy with the politics that were being, but you cannot talk about it. And I think that's the main issue, is you have to be able to talk about things. You have to be able to talk about things honestly. Yeah.
Why don't people talk about it?
Because they couldn't, because of political correctness. It was not that it was not okay to talk about. And you can see that with everything nowadays. You have to use a very particular language when you're talking about touchy subjects in public and in the public sphere. And politicians have to stand by this very, very, and also like celebrities and also like people like you and I, we have to use the correct type of language, political correct language to talk about things. And it's very, very dangerous to give someone the power of correcting your speech and having the power to tell you how to speak and what language to use, what words to use, because you are in the end controlling how they think, because you use your words are so important. Your language is so important. So that's yeah.
Wow. So what can the consequences be with political correctness if people don't dare to speak?
And people get fired from their jobs.
Wow.
That's
yeah.
one. And you have things happening around you that you can't do anything about. And I don't know. It's and you have societies that are just not going by what their people want. They are going by, I don't know.
Yeah, but you almost have to ask yourself the question: if the majority thinks this way, but doesn't dare to speak about it, then who wants it, and why is it happening?
Yeah, because of the government. The government wants it. The establishment wants it. And that's the thing. Like, it's so insane to me. And I know that the politicians have never worked in the way of the citizens. It's not been democratic in that sense for a very long time. But like reading that, just that single thing, like that's been on my mind since I read it, because it was so bizarre to me. Like 81% of the public does not want you to do this. And how they've ramped it up since then is insane. It becomes so clear when you look at things like that.
Exactly. I was just going to say, it becomes so clear that if the majority thinks this way and they don't dare to talk about it, or it doesn't happen, then someone else must enforce the agenda, let's call it. And and you can get all deep rabbit hole-ish with these things, but you don't know I don't know if there's like an organized group of people trying to pull the threads. I don't know, but what I see is the consequences of these things happening, like the consequences of feminism and its war on family. And what is the consequences on the war on family? The consequences on war on men, and also the war on women. And all these threads, when I study them, they point to the same direction, and that is to make us more and more and more and more dependent on the state. And it also makes us more miserable, and as you said, people speaking out. When I did a podcast with Kenny, we did a podcast on the book The Way of the Superior Man. He got socially chastised at his school. Like he became a ghost. People didn't dare talk to him anymore. And I think that's just so fucked up.
But I think that one thing that has been, I don't know if it's because like I've started to surround myself with different people, and like I've gotten this platform, but I feel at least I feel like this is changing. Like it's not the same as it was like 2 years ago. Like I feel like it's changing, that we are able to talk about more things more clearly. I think that we're moving in the right directions in some places, but we're moving in the wrong direction in other places. Like the most important thing that we have to look at is the school right now. It's insane, like what they're doing and what they're teaching our children, and how we're turning, like we're not even looking at the school. Politicians won't touch it. Won't touch it. Journalists won't touch it. It's old news for them, which has been the most insane thing to me.
What do you mean, if you want to dwell deeper into when you said about the schools?
So we have this gender studies type ideas, and the postmodernism ideas and the feminism ideas. Like and those are slipping into the preschool guidelines. They're slipping into the school guidelines. They're slipping into all types of classes. You have so much ideological brainwash going on in the schools, which I've been trying to research into that and look into it and like try to talk about it. And I've tried to get in touch with journalists about this, and I've sent my my research to them, but they don't want to talk about it. I've asked, why are you not talking about the school? And I've asked politicians and I've asked journalists. They won't touch it because they feel that it's old news and that they can't do anything about it. And I don't understand why. It's because I think it's too fuzzy. It's too fuzzy for them. And I want to see. I think Ivan Arpi is writing a book right now about. He's just released a book about the university. And so there are some people talking about it, but I don't know. We need to look at the preschool, most of all, the preschool and yeah.
What have you seen when you did your studies on the preschools and
the most disturbing thing is how these preschool teachers are using their classroom to show how ideological their classrooms are and how ideological the teachings are, and they are telling other preschool teachers to do the same. If you go on to Instagram, I can show you this. If you go to Instagram,
should I go to Instagram
he's blocked me. He's blocked me. Yeah, you can go. So if you look on Instagram, you search for Herr Genus, Fröken Genus.
Herr Genus?
Yes.
Herr och fru... Nej, det var fel.
Herr Fröken heter han.
Herr Fröken. There, I found it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Look at all those things that he has and all the rainbows and all of that stuff that he has posted on there. It's all these things on his classroom. And then like when he gets, and I did a video on him, and then I also messaged him the video because I wanted him to see it because it was about him. And he said,
you did a video to him?
Yes, I did a video about him and about the things that he is doing. And he simply referred to the guidelines, the preschool guidelines. And if you look at the preschool guidelines, there is nothing wrong with what he's doing.
Wow.
Because it's because according to the värdegrund.
The value foundation of
so they're supposed to work with they're supposed to work with that. And so what he's doing is completely right according to the guidelines. And there are many more like him. And you can see in the comments there are like other preschool teachers who are like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do that." And it's using ideological language, it's using like ideological teachings and to preschoolers. Well, I think his is like grade 2, maybe. I don't know, they're young.
You know.
And it's mandatory from the age of 7 that you go to school, preschool.
To me, it's so disturbing because, children, they are so innocent. And in a way, these things can like become psychological abuse on children.
Yes.
They in psychology, we know this, that especially very young children, the first thing, you know, they discover in forming their identity is the first thing that happens is a baby is born, and the baby can't tell the difference between him, herself, and mommy at
Yeah.
first. Like there's no separation really, and then slowly the baby starts to realize that I am me and there is mommy, and the most important thing for the child is to have a connection to mommy. And what happens later is that if it's a boy, that I'm not the same as mommy, I'm different. Look down, you know, and that is a so crucial step in the forming of identity. And if you try to fuck with that and say confuse the child like with postmodernism and tell the child, you know, no, you can choose what you want to be. Do you want to be a girl? You can be a girl, you know, and that's just that's no, you can't.
No.
You you
You
know,
can't. And you have to
that's
they're robbing they're robbing their children of reality. How are they
yes,
supposed to they can't. Like they don't know what reality is. If they can be a
no,
girl and a boy and whatever, like they don't know what reality is. And they think what's wrong with being girls and boys? What's wrong with being two different two different things, two different genders? There's nothing wrong with that. And what's wrong with boys on average liking different things than girls? There's nothing wrong with that. And what's wrong? Like the most fundamental thing that they have a problem with is like, oh well, girls play with dolls and guys play with trucks, and that's bad. No, it's not bad. Girls play with dolls because they like taking care of little. They want to be like mommy. They want to take care of something. They want to be like mommy, and they like to take care of things. And boys,
yes,
they want structures. They want to they like mechanical things. They want to spin
yeah,
the wheels and press on the little buttons. And that doesn't mean that we have to put any sort of value into that and be like, oh well, that means that boys are smarter or that girls are dumb. Like that's the feminists who are doing that.
yes. Feminism are shaming women for being
Yes.
women,
Yes.
not men.
No.
I love women. No, I appreciate a woman.
Yeah.
I, you know, and I see also, just as I see with how it affects men in the groups, um, how miserable and unhappy they become when they try to be women. They just
Yeah.
can't do it. They just can't do it, and they almost,
It's
you know,
creepy. It's so creepy.
yes,
Males who try to be these male feminists and try to be more feminine, they're creepy. You get a bad
okay.
vibe. You don't want to be close to them.
I don't trust them.
No. You cannot trust one of those.
And you know,
Those.
one of the those yeah, but one of the reasons men push each other is to see who will bitch out if things become real and who will not. It's a way of bonding,
Hmm.
you know, and it hurts me because I also see a lot of women who are suffering because they are trying to be something that they don't really want to be, you know. And I talked about class with this, that there is a difference between the self and the I. The self is who you are, and the I can be who you think you are. I am called, that's my I identity. But deeper than that, there is the self. And when you try to become, you know, the definition of narcissism in bioenergetic analysis is identification with an mental image rather than with your bodily self.
Hmm.
So if I, as a man, believe I am a woman, then I am identifying with a mental image of a woman and symbolically becoming a woman. And I think there's a very great distinction that Ryan Michler from Order of Man says, that you can be a feminine man. You can be a feminine man, but you're
Hmm.
still a man. You know, I think it becomes so confused with this gender, that gender is penis and vagina, And there are those exceptions with those people born with two genitals at the same time. But
it's such a small percentage. It's such a
yeah,
minimal percentage.
yes.
And you can always judge from the secondary sex characteristics that hello, that's a male, or hello, that's a boy. It's not that difficult.
It just gets, when we start to talk about this, it just, when you start to penetrate the layers of the logic, it doesn't make sense. And you just start to wonder, where did it come from even? How did this even become a thing? You know, how, you know, if you have said to someone like 100 years ago that you can be a female if you want to, that wouldn't have made sense.
No.
And I think that ties to postmodernism. And if you think about postmodernism and its increasing popularity, do you see any dangers with that philosophy of omnipotent subjectivity, or how do you view postmodernism? What is your take on it and its effects?
Well, I think that postmodernism, I think that it's interchangeable with like the feminist view of things. And I think it's not good. I don't think it's giving us anything good. Basically. But I don't usually use the term postmodernism, because I think it's a very diffuse term, and I think that a lot of people are just,
Throwing
I don't
it
know.
around.
Yeah.
What would you say? What would you say?
I don't know. Well, I mean, it is the postmodernism era, the era that we're all living in, and it's the same with feminism. Like, I don't support this way of thinking and viewing the world, and also that just your feelings matter more than the facts, and that like this subjectivity that you are talking about, that we all have our reality, and you have to respect my reality, that I am a man, but you can see that I'm a woman, or like that. These invisible structures that we're all living in, and all
Invisible
of that.
structures.
Mm. Or what do you think?
I think I have a theory about it, and I have developed on it in my book. I work in the book. I describe the four archetypes the same as Robert Moore worked with the king, warrior, magician, and the lover. And the magician I label as the ego layer.
Mm-hmm.
And I theorize that perhaps in this we have a collective revelation of the magician, that we have discovered that there is you can view things in different ways, and that is the ultimate reality. That if you can view, I can view this pen in many different ways. If I got stabbed with a pen that looks like this in my neck, I would probably feel terrible by looking at it, you know. And perhaps I and another person got this pen as a present when he graduated, etc. And you know, that's true, but it's not. I think the mistake they are making is that they see that there are endless interpretations,
Mm-hmm.
but they fail to see that there are some finite facts.
Yeah.
And I have been very adrift in the subjectivity wonderland in my own life once upon a time, and the therapy of the bioenergetic therapy made me realize the dangers of that, and why it had happened in the first place. Because bioenergetic analysis work with the body to relieve problems in the mind. the fundamental premise in the therapy is that you are your body. And if you have like depression, for example, is often a result of an organism that has emptied its reserve tanks energy by living through the will for extended periods of time and collapses and doesn't have any energy to respond anymore. And the dangers with postmodernism is that you can you believe that the I is who you are in a way. And when you believe that the I is who you are, then you will feel lost, you will feel disconnected, you will feel confused out of hell. Because you can, and this is how I experience being lost in subjectivity land, is that there was these endless oceans of interpretations of potentialities and everything, and nothing made more, sense to me than the other. Nothing seemed more right or wrong. But when I discovered myself and my body, my inner king, then every thought that I have more or less passes through my king, if that makes sense.
Well, you can basically, like, if you want to see it in, you can also see that in like a moral compass kind of way. Like you need that moral compass somehow. And that's like one of the things with this era that we're living in now, like postmodernism, is that we're searching for God and everything. And we but we don't have our own moral compass to go by, basically. But we're searching religion everywhere because we don't have it.
God is dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people are very disconnected from their bodies, and that's why postmodernism is so popular. It can only be accepted as an ideology if you have lost contact with your inner compass, let's say. Well, Jen.
That's me.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This went fast. I think we have actually gone through all the questions that I have.
It's been very, very interesting talking to you.
Yes, and speaking in English makes it a bit harder, at least for me. But I feel talking to you was so interesting, and you are so you're wise.
You too.
Thank you. And you said many things a lot of times where I was like, whoa. So I hope people listening too will get that response. It was
really, really happy to hear that. That's a very nice compliment. That's what you.
Yes, I was really, really impressed and really got many things from listening to you, and also wonderful. And I think men listening to this as well will feel how wonderful it is to see a woman doesn't hate you, This is the fundamental thing. And I hope women listening too will be given strength from you, because what I see is a display of strength, and I see a display of bravery, and which ties to the moral compass. And I think a lot of women are afraid. They are afraid, and what you are doing is so important, but talking like this. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
So the people listening now and find it interesting and want to know more about you, where can they find you and your content?
I have my YouTube channel. That's Jellybean Gen. on YouTube. And then I have my Twitter is Genpodden, so at Genpodden. And then on Instagram also Jellybeanco art. I need to change that because it doesn't match with anything else. But yeah, so I do videos like every other week. I try to have it every week, but it doesn't work. It's too stressful. But I make videos on these types of topics.
Yeah, I will be sure to put all the links in the description so they can just click on it and they will find you.
Mm-hmm.
And Jen, what are your projects in the future? What are you planning?
So right now, the plan is just to keep on doing what I'm doing. So I'm just going to keep on doing videos, and I'm also going to start a second channel where I'm just going to talk on Swedish issues and in Swedish. And I might start a podcast soon, but that's still in the works. So there's a lot of things that I'm planning on doing, and also I'm going to be writing a little bit more, getting a website started. So I'm focusing all my time and energy on just building more things and being able to talk about these things, and also having time over to research more and learn more. Because I'm not an expert in anything. I'm just talking about what I find interesting.
Yeah. So you're going to create more channels and more content.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically.
Good.
Yeah.
Good plans. And if you were to give any advice to the young people listening, or older people, or just people listening, to those people growing up now and the other, what would you give an advice? What would you say if you
read more? Read more, and just be curious, and don't back down, and be calm if you're just starting to learn about these subjects and you feel that people around you, because I get that question a lot, how do you talk to people who don't agree with you? It's just be calm, be aware, and be calm and try to talk with people. And I don't know, that's not do you understand what I'm saying? I don't know, I feel like I messed
It makes perfect sense. Read more or die trying. Yeah. Right?
I feel like that's a good message.
Yeah. You don't have to burn books to destroy a culture, you just have to get people to stop reading them.
True.
Yeah. Well then, thank you for coming on, and
thank you so much for having me on.
Hopefully we can do this sometime again in the future.
You have to come on my channel sometime.
When
this
I would love to.
With this Corona time is over, you have to come up and visit up in the north.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Thank you.
Thank you. And be sure to subscribe, you people listening, and so you get more content when content is available. Signing out.